Uh-oh, what's gonna go?
Long before Raw became a 3-hour juggernaut packed with pyro-filled Titantrons and blockbuster matches every Monday night, it began as a risky experiment. A live wrestling show broadcast straight from the heart of New York City. No safety net, no retakes, no filters. Just WWF's wildest stars trying to grab the world's attention. Monday Night Raw wasn't born out of competition, but out of pure innovation. In January 1993, WWF needed something new, something unpredictable, fast, and loud. Wrestling was changing, and Vince McMahon knew it was time to break away from the old studio-style shows and bring real, street-level energy back into the product. That idea became Monday Night Raw, filmed inside the tight Manhattan Center ballroom, where the crowd was so loud it could drown out the commentator. Unlike the calmer primetime wrestling, Raw had a gritty, chaotic, anything-can-happen feel that matched the vibe of New York City itself. As the video begins, let's go back to that first night and feel the spark that turned Monday nights into wrestling's true battleground. Wrestling in 1993. By late 1992 and early 1993, the American wrestling scene was shaky, and the WWF stood at a major turning point. The company had lost the man who carried them through the 80s boom, Hulk Hogan. After WrestleMania 8, Hogan practically vanished from WWF TV for 11 months, leaving the company without its biggest attraction. Without him, WWF leaned heavily on rising talents like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, incredible wrestlers, but not yet household names who could pull mainstream viewers the way Hogan once did. At the same time, WCW wasn't yet a ratings monster, but they were slowly strengthening their TV presence. They were investing in production, building a more structured roster, and positioning themselves for the future. WWF could see these early moves and knew things wouldn't stay quiet forever. But the bigger problem was inside their own product. WWF's main shows, Superstars, Wrestling Challenge, and Primetime Wrestling were starting to feel old and repetitive. Most episodes were taped weeks in advance, making them predictable and lacking the rush of real live action. Fans could feel that the shows weren't keeping up with the excitement happening in other areas of entertainment. Even attempts to fix primetime wrestling with roundtable discussions or new personalities couldn't hide the fact that it had become stale. Vince McMahon could see everything piling up at the same time. The company no longer had the star power it once depended on. Their old studio-style shows were becoming outdated and boring. WCW was slowly growing stronger, and a new generation of fans wanted faster, fresher, more exciting entertainment. All these pressures made it clear that WWF needed a major change. So, it became obvious. The old style of wrestling TV just wasn't working anymore. Cable TV in the early 90s was bold and fast-paced, and audiences wanted shows that felt real and unscripted. The USA Network also pushed for something fresher. They wanted WWF to create a show that felt modern, exciting, and alive, something aimed at younger viewers who were used to shows with edge and attitude. This pressure sparked Vince's big idea. He proposed a brand new type of weekly show, a live wrestling broadcast, completely unfiltered, where anything could happen, and that would replace primetime wrestling. This would be the opposite of the carefully packaged studio shows fans were used to. He wanted movement, noise, chaos, and genuine reactions. That idea became Monday Night Raw. Raw would be filmed live at the Manhattan Center in New York City, a small, intimate venue with fans practically hanging over the rails. Their energy filled the entire room, giving Raw a raw and loud atmosphere you could feel through the screen. Raw set out to break every rule of the old system. Instead of canned commentary, everything was live and real. Instead of stiff, scripted segments, the show welcomed chaos, surprises, and sudden twists. Instead of depending only on big names, Raw mixed rising stars with celebrity guests and story-heavy moments. And instead of a clean studio look, it aimed for a messy, gritty, electric vibe that matched the energy of New York. At the time, almost no wrestling promotion attempted live weekly TV. It was expensive, risky, and hard to control. But that risk is exactly what made Raw different. For Vince McMahon, Raw was more than a TV show. It was a strategy. It allowed him to rebuild WWF during Hogan's temporary absence and transition, preparing for the rapidly changing TV landscape as Hogan returned shortly after Raw's launch. USA Network got the edgy programming they wanted, and WWF got a chance to reinvent itself before the wrestling world shifted again. What Vince didn't know at the time was that this move would help him stay ahead of WCW, at least for a while. When WCW later launched Monday Nitro in 1995, a live show designed to compete directly with Raw, it sparked the intense Monday Night War. Raw's creation, in many ways, lit the first fuse of that legendary battle. In the end, the birth of Monday Night Raw wasn't just about solving a crisis. It was about taking a crumbling situation and turning it into something revolutionary. By embracing risk, chaos, and live energy, Vince wiped away the last traces of the old studio era and opened the door to what many fans now call the golden age of wrestling television. How Monday Night Raw was built. If you rewind the clock to early 1993 and slip behind the curtains of the World Wrestling Federation, you will find a company in the middle of a transformation. At the center of that shift stood a handful of creators who would leave a permanent mark on wrestling television. Vince McMahon, Bruce Pritchard, Kevin Dunn, Bobby Heenan, and a small but relentless production crew determined to build something fans had never seen before. Their mission was to create a wrestling show that felt wild, alive, and impossible to predict, something that captured the chaotic spirit of New York nightlife on live TV. The show's name said it all. Vince McMahon chose the name RAW because he wanted the show to feel like it was made without the use of tapes, filters, or complex studio techniques, but rather with raw footage, emotion, and energy. WWF needed a more rugged, gritty identity after years of living in the vibrant, cartoon-like era of the late 1980s. That change began with Raw, which featured gutsy plots, tougher characters, and a show that felt less like a polished performance and more like a boisterous street brawl. The debut episode, broadcast live on January 11, 1993, came from the Manhattan Center Grand Ballroom in New York City, a venue you can recognize in a heartbeat. Velvet theater seats, gold balconies, a tiny club-style space packed with only about 1,000 fans who somehow sounded like 10,000. Balcony fans leaned over the rails, banging on the metal and shouting straight down at the ring, so they were practically merging with the show itself. The production matched that gritty energy. One simple entrance, basic lighting, no massive stage, and fans close enough to touch the aisle. It felt more like early ECW than polished WWF. Meanwhile, Kevin Dunn and the production team were scrambling in the control room, hitting every camera cut and mic adjustment with zero margin for error. Whatever happened was broadcast directly to millions of viewers, with no safety net or tape delay. The goal was to show wrestling exactly as it was, real, unfiltered, and bursting with energy. Bruce Pritchard, Vince McMahon, and the creative team knew Raw had to be nothing like primetime wrestling, the show it replaced. Primetime was all studio talk, pre-taped segments, and a very controlled feel. Raw flipped that completely. It was fast, loud, live, and totally exposed. A show that ran with the same chaotic, rough-around-the-edges energy as early 90s New York itself. It wasn't meant to be polished, but it was meant to feel alive. Everything was even more unpredictable backstage. The crew leaned heavily into live comedy and unexpected moments. One of the best examples was Bobby the Brain Heenan on the debut episode, being locked out of the building and trying different disguises to sneak in. These funny bits mixed with serious storylines gave Raw a unique tone where viewers never knew what would happen next. The wrestling itself matched the energy. Early Raw episodes featured the Steiner brothers tearing through opponents and high-profile matches such as Mr. Perfect versus Ric Flair in Loser Leaves Town contests, and each match amplified by the tight, screaming crowd. WWF promoted Raw as a show with no limits. The tagline, "Uncut, Uncooked, Uncensored," perfectly summed up what they wanted the audience to feel. That this wasn't another safe, taped wrestling hour. This was wrestling in its loudest and wildest form. The team behind Raw created a blueprint that reshaped wrestling television for an entire era. Producing a live show every single week was risky, expensive, and incredibly tough, something even WCW avoided until Nitro arrived in 1995. But the payoff was undeniable. The raw crowd noise, the unexpected moments, and the real, intimate look of the Manhattan Center made Raw feel completely new. It was a whole new way of presenting wrestling. What Vince McMahon and his crew put together that January night introduced a style built on real-time energy, live chaos, and a complete lack of polish, and it changed everything. The first ever Raw. So just like that, a new era in professional wrestling began on January 11th, 1993. WWF debuted something the industry had never really tried before. A live, uncut, anything-can-happen wrestling show broadcast directly into American homes inside the cramped, echoing walls of the Manhattan Center in New York City. The inaugural Monday Night Raw was not a well-produced show. It wasn't intended to be, but it was chaotic, noisy, and unpredictable. But that's precisely why it worked. Viewers were introduced to Raw's chaotic personality before the show had even formally started. Sean Mooney attempted to introduce the broadcast while standing at the doors outside the Manhattan Center. However, he wasn't by himself. After being replaced on commentary, an enraged Bobby the Brain Heenan interrupted right away, pleading, arguing, and plotting to enter the building. Heenan attempted disguise after disguise, each one more absurd than the last. Every time, Mooney turned him down. This was more than just a joke, as it set the tone for the whole show. Yokozuna, the enormous newcomer on a fast track to the main event, marked the start of the in-ring action with a blatant display of dominance. At this point, Yokozuna wasn't just undefeated, he had not even been knocked off his feet. In one of the show's most famous squash matches, he tore through Koko Beware in under 4 minutes, needing only a few crushing moves before finishing with the bonsai drop. Rob Bartlett set the mood right away with the line that Yokozuna has an ass like an amphitheater, capturing the unfiltered tone of early Raw. The message was clear that this was the arrival of WWF's next unstoppable monster. Next came a completely different kind of showcase. A pure, hard-hitting tag team wrestling. Fresh off their WCW run, Rick and Scott Steiner bulldozed the Executioners with a barrage of suplexes that felt explosive inside the small Manhattan Center. Every slam echoed through the room. Every throw shook the floor. The match was a quick, powerful display of Scott's strength, Rick's wrestling ability, and their unbeatable teamwork, ending with the Steinerizer Bulldog in just over 3 minutes. It was the kind of straightforward, high-impact action that would help define Raw's early in-ring identity. After the Steiner brothers' explosive showcase, Raw shifted to its first real competitive match of the night, the Intercontinental Champion Shawn Michaels versus Max Moon. Though the Max Moon gimmick never quite clicked, Paul Diamond and Shawn had real chemistry from years of working together, and it showed. The match was surprisingly solid, fast-paced, and clean, easily one of the better in-ring performances on the debut episode. Once HBK hit the teardrop suplex for the win, the match did exactly what Raw needed. It spotlighted the Intercontinental Champion as a true standout performer on this new live stage. To close the night, Raw turned to its most dependable attraction, The Undertaker. With Paul Bearer at his side, the Dead Man took on Damien Demento in a simple, no-risk main event meant to give the show a strong, familiar finish. This match was about presence. The crowd was loud, the lights reflected off Bearer's urn, and Undertaker looked every bit like a supernatural giant in the small Manhattan Center. Demento did his job selling Taker's strength, and despite a few rough moments, the match stayed steady. A quick tombstone in just under 3 minutes sealed the win and ended Raw with the dark, iconic image fans expected. It was the perfect finish to a night full of unpredictable energy. Beyond the matches, several moments added personality to Raw's debut. Doink the Clown, still in his darker early form, kept appearing around ringside, laughing into cameras, hovering near fans, and later telling Vince McMahon that he enjoyed making children cry. This attracted Crush, who told Doink to stop, but Doink used a squirt gun to nail him and fled while laughing. Razor Ramon also got major focus. After a hype video, he cut an in-ring promo with Vince, bragging that he would accomplish in months what took Bret Hart years, and boasting about attacking Owen Hart earlier that week. He solidified his position as Raw's greatest villain going into the Royal Rumble by flicking his toothpick in Vince's face as the segment came to an end. Vince McMahon's commentary, which skillfully combined the roles of announcer and promoter, provided a burst of high-energy excitement, and Rob Bartlett's wild, uneven commentary added to the show's rough, unpredictable feel, even if it wasn't universally loved. Right before the show went off the air, Sean Mooney told Bobby Heenan he was finally allowed to go inside. A simple, funny ending to his running gag. The debut episode succeeded because it didn't try to be perfect. It tried to be alive. It successfully mixed comedy with action, characters with chaos. Simple matches with loud fans. Everything felt unpredictable, unscripted, and immediate. Exactly what wrestling needed in 1993. That feeling would go on to define Monday nights for decades to come.
Walk the beat. I imagine this man could do almost anything.
Aftermath and legacy. When the first episode of Monday Night Raw went off the air on January 11th, 1993, nobody fully understood what had just begun, but the impact was immediate. Fans felt it. The TV network felt it. The wrestling world would soon feel it too. Raw's debut introduced a new way of doing wrestling television. In the days that followed, WWF saw a surge of excitement. Fans loved the tight, energetic atmosphere of the Manhattan Center, where you could hear every chant, every slam, every gasp. The live format made viewers feel like they were right there in the room, sharing the chaos as it unfolded. That feeling mattered, and USA Network noticed. The channel renewed its trust in the WWF product, confident that Raw was the fresh, modern spark wrestling needed. Practically, the company still had limitations. Producing a live show every single Monday wasn't yet possible financially or logistically, so Raw began alternating between live and taped episodes. Even the taped shows kept that anything can happen spirit alive. Whether live or not, Raw refused to become predictable. Every week felt like a new experiment, a new risk, a new chance to surprise the audience. Those early risks really paid off. especially a few years later. By 1995, Raw had entered one of the most important eras in wrestling history, the Monday Night Wars. WCW's new flagship, Nitro, went head-to-head with Raw in a battle for ratings, viewers, and cultural attention. It was a war fought with shocks, swerves, and out-of-nowhere moments. Luckily for WWF, Raw had already spent its first few years training for exactly that style of television. Its foundation, built on live chaos, fast storytelling, character-driven drama, helped it survive the tough years and ultimately win the war. From that victory came Raw's greatest strength, which was its ability to evolve. Fans already know how many eras this show has carried. The athletic spark of the new generation, the chaos and attitude that defined an entire culture, the explosive rise of the ruthless aggression stars, the family-friendly PG shift, the reality era's blurred lines, and now the global, digitally driven modern era. Raw has adapted to every change in wrestling and every change in the world around it. No other weekly show has evolved through so many identities and stayed at the center of the wrestling universe the entire time. That longevity gave rise to more significant cultural history. Raw officially surpassed shows, networks, and entire genres to become the longest-running weekly episodic series in cable television history. The spirit of that first night in the Manhattan Center still echoes in every episode today. Even though Raw has grown from tiny ballrooms to huge arenas around the world, the same things remain: the closeness, the loud crowds, and the feeling that anything can happen. Everything Raw became with every era, every war, every milestone traces back to that very first Monday in 1993, when wrestling took a leap into live TV and never looked back.
Oh, another one! It's like trying to stop a battleship.
Marvelous verdict. The very first Monday Night Raw wasn't flashy or packed with spectacle, but it changed wrestling forever. That tiny Manhattan Center show pulled WWE out of its safe studio format and threw it into the chaos of live TV, giving fans an up-close, unpredictable experience that felt more like an underground fight night than a polished production. In 1 hour, Raw introduced the formula that would fuel the Monday Night Wars, shape the Attitude Era, and help build WWE into the global powerhouse it is today. More than 3 decades later, every episode still carries a piece of that gritty New York debut. Got a favorite early Raw moment? Drop it in the comments. Let's relive the madness of '93 together. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more wrestling history breakdowns.